The summer evening cast a soft golden hue across the Connecticut suburbs. At the prestigious Willowgate Country Club, Charles and Margaret Carter's 40th wedding anniversary celebration had been orchestrated like a royal affair. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers, every table adorned with white roses and delicate orchids. A string quartet played softly as elegantly dressed guests mingled beneath the glow of legacy and tradition. Ella Carter entered the hall with her 16-year-old daughter Madison and 8-year-old son Evan. Her navy blue dress was one she had altered herself. Budget constraints didn't allow for luxury anymore. Once the pride of the Carter family, Ella had fallen out of favor after divorcing her husband Andrew Whitmore following his affair with a younger woman. Margaret greeted her with an air kiss and a fleeting glance. "Ella, you look comfortable." And Madison, "Dear, you look lovely in that dress Grandma chose." Ella smiled politely. Madison offered no such courtesy. Charles swept Evan into his arms with exaggerated affection. "There's my boy. Got a special seat for you right next to Grandpa at the head table." Ella felt the first ripple of unease, but she swallowed it. This is their day, she reminded herself. I won't let it be about me. The hall buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses. Ella moved among the guests, playing the role of the poised daughter. She gracefully accepted condolences on her divorce. "Yes, it's been hard, but the kids are strong and we're adjusting." Each word rehearsed, each smile carefully practiced. Then the air changed. Andrew entered tailored suit confident stride, hand in hand with Sloane, his 25-year-old fiancé and former assistant. Her golden hair glinted under the chandeliers. Ella's heart dropped. No one had told her they would be here, and yet there they were being warmly embraced by Charles and Margaret as if nothing had ever happened. Margaret complimented Sloane's dress. Charles clapped Andrew on the back like a beloved son. Ella stood frozen. When she finally met her mother's gaze, Margaret simply shrugged. "Darling, he's practically family. We couldn't exclude him." Madison watched from the corner, her expression unreadable. She tapped rapidly on her phone, then looked up and locked eyes with Ella. "We need to go," she said in a quiet, urgent voice. Ella blinked. "What, why?" Madison's voice was low but firm. "I'll explain in the car, but Mom, please, this is serious." Ella looked into her daughter's eyes, focused, steady, not impulsive. Something had shifted. She wasn't being dramatic. Still, this was her parents' anniversary. Evan was happily chatting with his grandfather, and the room was filled with guests. Ella sighed. "Give me a few minutes. I need to say goodbye and grab Evan." Ella Carter had always known her family excelled at performing. Since childhood, she had been trained to smile on cue, speak pleasantly at dinner parties, and never burden others with raw emotions. In the Carter household, preserving appearances was far more sacred than telling the truth. After her divorce, Ella had hoped her pain would finally make her parents, Charles and Margaret, see her differently. And at first it seemed they had. They sent gifts to the kids, called more often, and even invited her for Sunday dinners. "Maybe they're finally realizing what I went through," Ella had once told herself with cautious optimism. But Madison wasn't buying it. "They don't look at you like a person anymore," Madison had said. "More like a broken project they want to fix." Ella had smiled, brushing the girl's hair behind her ear. "They're trying, sweetheart. It's just their way of loving." Madison hadn't argued. She'd simply watched quietly, like someone waiting for a truth to unfold. Back at the country club, the celebration was in full swing. Ella stood at the edge of the ballroom, observing the crowd, longtime friends of her parents, business acquaintances, distant relatives she barely remembered. Everyone played their part in the great Carter performance. And Ella, once the golden daughter, was now a polite extra in a story she no longer controlled. The presence of Andrew only deepened the wound. He was laughing with Charles's colleagues, while Sloane, flawless and confident, moved among guests like the beloved daughter-in-law she never was. Charles had Evan by the hand, proudly guiding him from one introduction to the next. "This is Evan," Charles would say, his voice full of pride. "My grandson." The future of the Carter name. Ella's stomach tightened. For a moment she watched from a distance, frozen. She had been the one raising Evan and Madison alone, juggling freelance work and part-time jobs, while Andrew lived comfortably propped up by family support. And yet in this room, she was invisible. She kept her expression neutral. But Madison's wasn't. The teen was watching every movement, every gesture, the way Charles patted Andrew's back, the way Margaret adjusted Evan's tie. Small gestures, loud meanings. "What are you doing just standing here?" Madison, an older cousin, asked. "Why not dance with the other teens?" "I prefer watching," Madison replied smoothly. "You learn more that way." When the time for speeches arrived, Charles stood at the center of the ballroom, raising his champagne flute. 40 years, he began, of building our love, yes, but also our legacy. And to ensure that legacy continues, sometimes difficult choices must be made. His eyes swept the room, pausing momentarily on Andrew and Evan, then flicked past Ella with an almost imperceptible look of detachment, like she was a chapter already closed. "We're not just celebrating the past tonight. We're securing the future. For the Carter family name and those who can carry it forward." The guests applauded, though several exchanged confused glances. Ella sipped her champagne, her throat tight. "It's just a speech," she told herself. "Don't overthink it." But across the room, Madison was watching her, and this time her look wasn't questioning. It was warning. While the ballroom buzzed with toasts and laughter, Madison Carter sat quietly near the window, her sharp eyes scanning every movement like a silent observer trained in human behavior. To most, tonight was a celebration of love and longevity. But to Madison, it was a poorly veiled rehearsal for something far more calculated. At 16, Madison had always been more perceptive than her peers. While her mother Ella tried desperately to earn back favor from her parents after the divorce from Andrew, Madison saw something different, her mom falling into the same old cycle of appeasement and disappointment. She had noticed it long ago during Sunday dinners at her grandparents' home. The way Grandpa Charles called Evan the future of the Carter name, how Grandma Margaret filled Evan's head with dreams of Ivy League schools and trust funds. Meanwhile, Madison, quiet, observant, and never one to fawn, was treated like she simply didn't fit the mold. She once told her mom, "Have you ever noticed how they look at Evan like he's their second chance, and I'm just there?" Ella had smiled softly, brushing it off. "They just don't know how to connect with you yet. Give them time, sweetheart." But Madison didn't believe in yet. In the Carter family, love came with qualifications. Tonight, though, the truth stood center stage. When Andrew arrived hand in hand with Sloane and was greeted with hugs and beaming smiles, Madison's worst suspicions were confirmed. This wasn't about forgiveness. It was about consolidation. Control. She watched as Grandpa Charles proudly walked Evan through the room, introducing him like royalty to every business associate in the building. She noticed how the photographers placed Andrew, Charles, and Evan together in picture after picture. Her mother was often pushed to the edge of the frame. Madison herself was almost invisible. Her chest tightened not from hurt, but from urgency. Something wasn't right, and she needed to find out what it was. Then it happened. As she passed the hallway near Charles's small private office inside the club, Madison caught the low hum of voices. It was Andrew and Charles discussing trust transfers and keeping assets safe from emotional volatility. She froze, then instinctively stepped back, pulled out her phone and hit record. Moments later, while everyone was distracted preparing for cake and toasts, Madison slipped into the office. On the desk sat a familiar black briefcase. She didn't take anything, just opened it and took pictures. Legal documents, trust papers, transfer forms, her mother's name, Andrew's name, Charles as co-signer. The Victorian house her mother had been promised. Notes about custody realignments. Everything. When she returned, Madison saw her mother still smiling politely, Evan giggling on Andrew's lap. Enough was enough. She walked straight to Ella, took her hand, and whispered, "We have to go. Now." Ella looked confused. "Please, Mom, just trust me. I'll explain everything in the car, but we can't stay." Tonight, Madison knew one thing for sure. She was no longer the quiet granddaughter at the edge of family photos. She was the only one who hadn't been blinded, and it was time for her mother to see through her eyes. The ballroom at Willowgate Country Club shimmered with laughter music and clinking glasses. Crystal chandeliers cast glints of light on sequined gowns, while a string quartet filled the air with refined notes. Everything looked perfect, exactly how Charles and Margaret Carter liked it. Ella Carter forced a smile as she moved through small groups of guests, exchanging polite nods and brief conversations. On the surface, it was a flawless celebration, lavish, well-attended, and filled with family. But beneath the surface, something felt wrong. There was a hollowness in her chest, an echo she couldn't ignore. Despite being surrounded by people, Ella felt like an outsider in her own family's narrative. She wasn't here as a daughter, she was here as a footnote. As she reached for a glass of wine from a passing server, the grand ballroom doors opened behind her. Her hand froze in midair. Andrew Whitmore had arrived. He strode in confidently wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit. Sloane walked beside him, her arm looped through his golden hair cascading over her bare shoulders, her smile polished and performative. Ella stared frozen. Here she whispered to Lisa, her sister-in-law. Lisa looked down at her glass. "I thought you knew. Your mom invited them personally." Ella turned just in time to see Charles and Margaret embracing Andrew like a prodigal son. Margaret clasped Sloane's hand with admiration. "This dress is exquisite on you," she gushed. "Such taste." Charles gave Andrew a hearty pat on the back and led him into the crowd. No one acknowledged Ella. When Margaret's eyes finally met hers, she offered a casual shrug. "The past is behind us, darling. Andrew is still family. We couldn't leave him out of such a special occasion." Ella didn't respond. She turned on her heel and walked quickly to the bar. She downed her drink, then poured another, trying to swallow the rising wave of nausea. From the corner of her eye, she saw Madison watching her phone in hand. But Ella couldn't confront any of it yet, not while pretending everything was fine. Madison stood in the corner observing intently. Her fingers tapped away on her phone. While others assumed she was texting friends, Madison was taking notes, capturing moments, and tracking conversations. Something didn't feel right, and she had learned long ago never to ignore that feeling. Later, the slideshow began. A large screen displayed an elegant script, 40 Years of Love and Legacy. Photos played Charles and Margaret in Paris at family cabins at charity galas. But the newer photos told a different story. Andrew was in almost everyone, Evan too. Ella appeared sparingly. Madison appeared barely at all. It wasn't just a slideshow, it was a rewritten history. Charles stepped up to the microphone once more. With a smile, he beckoned Andrew and Evan to join him at the front. Margaret beamed as Evan stood beside his grandfather. "Family is legacy," Charles declared. "And today we are taking the first steps to ensure that the Carter legacy is carried forward by those most prepared to uphold it." Ella's heart pounded. Beside her, Madison slipped her hand into her mother's. There was no fear in the girl's eyes now, only focus. A storm was coming. After Charles's cryptic speech, the mood in the ballroom shifted. Not overtly, there was still laughter and champagne, but something underneath had changed. Ella Carter couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening behind her back. From where she stood, she could see Evan seated between Charles and Andrew. Both men leaned in toward the boy, speaking with smiles and nods. They looked like they were grooming him for something big, something she wasn't a part of. She approached casually, hoping to join the conversation, but as she neared the conversation, abruptly stopped. Andrew tucked away his phone. Evan hid what he had been looking at. "No one's in trouble," Ella said softly. "What were you talking about, Evan?" "Uncle Andrew said if I lived with him and Grandpa, I could go to a school with its own football stadium." Evan beamed. Ella felt her chest tighten. She looked at Andrew, calculated, composed, confident. This wasn't a casual visit. This was orchestrated. Madison, meanwhile, stood by the terrace, speaking in hushed tones with Aunt Joanne. Their body language was tense, guarded. As Ella approached, the conversation died immediately. "Just chatting about old family stories," Joanne said brightly. "Madison is such a sharp young woman." "What kind of stories?" Ella asked. "Family history," Madison replied flatly. Before Ella could press, the sound of a glass being tapped pulled everyone's attention toward the cake-cutting ceremony. People flowed back to the center while Ella stayed behind, overwhelmed. Later, Ella slipped away, pretending to need fresh air. But she didn't step outside. Instead, she found herself wandering down a quiet hallway near the restrooms. And there she nearly collided with Aunt Joanne. "Oh," Ella Joanne said, startled. "I was actually looking for you." "Why?" Ella asked, her voice cautious. Joanne leaned in, voice hushed. "I overheard something troubling. Your father and Andrew were discussing asset transfers. Your name came up. Words like unreliable, emotionally unstable. It didn't sound like a casual conversation. You think they're planning something behind my back? I'm not sure, but it didn't feel like a family discussion. It felt strategic." The words clung to Ella like smoke. She returned to the ballroom, searching for Madison, and couldn't find her. A server mentioned seeing her head outside. Ella followed and found her daughter on the terrace, whispering into her phone. Yes, both Mom's and Andrew's names were on the papers. There were red tags on specific pages. Is that legally binding? When Madison noticed her, she ended the call quickly. "Who are you talking to?" Ella asked. "Just a friend." "Madison." "Mom, have you ever thought it was strange that Grandpa keeps all the trust documents locked in his office?" "How would you know what's in his office?" "Last time we visited, Grandma let me study in there while he was golfing. I saw things, papers with your name, with Andrew's, a petition about Evan's custody." A breeze swept through the terrace, but Ella shivered. "You shouldn't have been snooping," Ella said quietly. "Even if they're planning something against you," Madison replied. "I just wanted to understand what's happening." There was no rebellion in her voice, only clarity. Ella was silent. And in that silence, a thought broke through. Maybe her daughter had seen the truth long before she had. The soft chime of clinking glasses rang through the ballroom once more, but this time it carried a different tone. There was an odd anticipation in the air as Charles Carter stepped up to the microphone for the second time that night. He held a glass of champagne in one hand. Beside him, Margaret stood poised, smiling like a queen beside her king. Ella Carter sat at one of the rear tables, still rattled from what Madison had just revealed. Her fingers trembled slightly as she set her wine glass down. "We're truly honored to have all of you here tonight," Charles began, his voice strong and deliberate. 40 years ago, I made the most important decision of my life, marrying Margaret, but also, as I now realize, the most strategic one. Laughter bubbled politely through the room, but Ella stiffened. Because marriage, Charles continued, when viewed through the right lens, is more than love. Its structure, its stability, its legacy. A few glances exchanged across the room. Ella felt Madison gently squeeze her hand under the table. It wasn't a comforting gesture. It was a silent warning. "We're not just here to look back," Charles said, raising his glass higher. "We're here to look forward, to secure the future. A future where the Carter legacy remains protected, guided by those who understand the value of sustainability and are ready to carry it forward." Ella's eyes darted toward Andrew, now standing close to the stage. Evan was beside him, beaming. Charles paused, then added, "In order to preserve what's been built, certain decisions must be made. Not everyone may understand them at first, but they are made with love and wisdom." More polite clapping, but there were also frowns. His words were vague, but Ella knew exactly what he was implying. She was being written out, and this toast was the first draft of the announcement. The toast ended, but its weight lingered. Ella sat frozen for several seconds. Around her, the party resumed. People returned to their drinks. The music swelled again. Flashbulbs flickered. But she didn't hear any of it. Madison leaned in, whispering, "They're getting ready to make something public. Maybe about the house. Maybe custody." That speech, it wasn't just about the anniversary. Ella swallowed hard. She wanted to argue. She wanted to call it paranoia. But for the first time all night, there was nothing to deny. It dawned on her then she wasn't just being excluded. She was being neutralized. They were showcasing family legacy not to celebrate her, but to rationalize erasing her from it. The air felt thicker. A storm was coming. But this time she wouldn't be standing alone. Since Charles's strange toast, the evening seemed to slow down in Madison's eyes. The glittering ballroom, the tinkling glasses, the polished smiles, it all looked rehearsed like a grand performance. But beneath the surface, Madison sensed a different script playing out, and she was determined to read it. She moved quietly through the room unnoticed, her expression calm, posture composed. She lingered near clusters of conversation, scrolling on her phone as if bored, but she was listening for the slips between sentences. "Everything will be sorted soon. Charles already has a plan. After tonight, it'll all be official." Phrases like these peppered the laughter. They weren't loud, but they were enough. Ella, meanwhile, was unraveling. She glanced around, constantly scanning for Madison. The unease inside her had bloomed into full-blown dread. Something was happening. Something deliberate, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd walked straight into a trap. Madison finally cornered Aunt Joanne near the left corridor. She didn't waste time. "Do you know what Grandpa and Andrew are planning?" she asked, her voice, calm, eyes steady. Joanne looked exhausted. "Not the full story, but I've seen them meeting with their attorney, and a man from the bank came by the house last week. And you're not concerned. Sweetheart, your grandfather's been keeping secrets since before I was your age. In this family, truth arrives late, if at all." She paused. "But this time, he's moving fast." Madison nodded, pulling out her phone. "If you hear anything else, let me know, please." When Ella returned to the table and saw the empty seat beside her, her heart dropped. She moved quickly through the crowd out to the hallway, then to the back terrace, and finally toward the small private office her father kept at the club. It was where he took confidential calls during business events. She had always been told it was off limits. She found Madison standing near the closed door, her face pale, phone in hand. "What are you doing here?" Ella asked, her voice hushed. Madison turned. "I overheard Grandpa and Andrew through the door. It wasn't locked." Ella felt a chill run through her. "What did you hear?" "Move the transfer ahead of schedule. Use Ella's emotional history to alter custody. And worst of all, she won't find out until it's finalized." Ella's stomach twisted. "I took pictures of some documents on the desk," Madison added. "I didn't touch anything, but you need to see them." Ella wanted to scold her, but then Madison held up her phone and the photos appeared. Pages with Ella's name, Andrew's signature, Charles's co-signature, property transfers, custody petitions, notes scribbled in the margins. It was real, planned, and in motion. Madison's voice was quiet but unwavering. "I know I shouldn't have snooped, but you had to see it, Mom. They're cutting you out. And me too." Ella couldn't breathe, but she nodded. "I've already backed everything up to my laptop," Madison said, "and I recorded part of their conversation." "You recorded?" "Just a snippet. When they said your name and Evan's, I had my mic on from my pocket." Ella didn't know whether to cry or collapse. Not from fear, but from pride. Her daughter had done what she hadn't dared to do, face the truth head on. The line had been drawn. The whispers were no longer whispers, and Ella knew this time she wouldn't walk away. As Ella Carter gripped her daughter's hand and moved through the grand foyer of the Willowgate Country Club, the glow of chandeliers and distant music faded behind her. She no longer heard the chatter or felt the weight of judgmental stares. All she knew was that every step was leading them out of a party that had never been a celebration, but a trap. Madison walked swiftly beside her, her face calm but firm. Ella leaned in and whispered, "I need to get Evan." Madison nodded. "Make it fast. Don't let Grandpa talk you into anything." Ella found Evan near a group of children clutching a party favor. When she knelt to tell him they were leaving, he frowned. "But Grandpa said there's a surprise after the cake." "We'll come back another time," she said gently, though her eyes darted across the room. She saw Charles watching. Then, as if on cue, Andrew stepped into her path. "Leaving already?" he asked, smiling coolly. "Your father was hoping to discuss Evan's school fund." Ella tightened her grip on Evan. "Not tonight." Andrew's tone dropped. "Don't be difficult, Ella. We're all just trying to help. You know you can't offer Evan the same future." Before Ella could reply, Madison stepped between them. "We're leaving," she said firmly. Ella blinked at her daughter's sudden authority. They walked quickly toward the doors. As they passed a group of Charles's attorneys near the exit, Ella caught a stray phrase in a hushed tone. "Transfer should finalize once custody is adjusted." The night air wrapped around them like freedom. The ornate world they'd left behind shrank in the rearview mirror as they reached their aging Honda Accord, humble but theirs. Evan fell asleep almost immediately in the back seat, his party favor clutched in one hand. Ella drove in silence, her grip on the wheel tight. Madison spoke first. "Are you ready to hear everything now?" Ella nodded. "Start from the beginning." They pulled into an empty lot behind a closed strip mall. Madison turned on the dome light and opened her phone. "It started 3 months ago," she said. "I found Aunt Vivian on Instagram." Ella turned sharply. That name stung like an old bruise. She told me what Grandpa did to her. How he used family gatherings to announce legal decisions already signed. How he rewrote the estate without warning. I realized it was happening again with you. Madison scrolled through messages, hundreds of them. Conversations between her and Vivian, detailing legal terms, psychological tactics, and red flags to watch for. Each screenshot hit Ella like a punch to the gut. "I've been watching everything," Madison continued. "And tonight I heard them. In his office. Grandpa and Andrew. I recorded part of it. I also took photos your name, Andrew's transfer documents, and one petition about Evan's custody." Ella said nothing. Her eyes brimmed with tears, not from heartbreak, but from awakening. "I was afraid you wouldn't believe me," Madison whispered. Ella reached for her daughter, pulling her into a fierce hug. "I believe you. I believe everything. You saw what I couldn't. You saved me." That night, once Evan was tucked into bed, Ella and Madison sat under the soft kitchen light, surrounded by copies of documents and screenshots. The toast, the chandelier, the applause, none of it mattered anymore. The real truth had emerged. And it had nothing to do with celebration. It had everything to do with survival. That night, after Madison had fallen asleep on the couch with her phone still in her hand, Ella Carter sat alone at the kitchen table, the glow of her laptop reflecting off her tired face. But something had shifted behind her eyes. Confusion was gone. In its place, a steady flame of resolve. She logged into an old shared email account, one she and Andrew used during their marriage. He'd likely forgotten it still existed. And there it was in the drafts folder, dozens of unsent messages between Andrew and her father, Charles. Property transfer should be finalized before school starts. Ella's distracted, too busy with the gallery. Madison's a liability, same temperament as Samantha. That name, Samantha. The disgraced aunt, the family ghost. Samantha Wallace, Charles's youngest sister, had vanished from family gatherings over a decade ago. Ella was told little, only that she caused drama, challenged Dad, and wanted more than she deserved. But now, for the first time, Ella wondered, what if Samantha hadn't been wrong, just unwilling to play along? Just before dawn, Ella found a sparse website for a boutique interior design firm based in Colorado. The founder, Samantha Wallace. On the contact page was a single email and phone number. She hesitated, then typed, "Aunt Samantha, this is Ella, Charles's daughter. Madison shared what you've told her. I need to talk to you. Are you available? Ella." The reply came in under 5 minutes. "I've been waiting for this call for years. Are you somewhere safe?" They spoke for over an hour. Samantha told her everything: how Charles had promised part of their parents' estate, then quietly transferred the assets elsewhere. How he announced legal changes at a family brunch, making her look hysterical when she objected. How he painted her as unstable, greedy, ungrateful. "When I pushed back, they said I was emotional," Samantha said. "When I stayed quiet, they said I lacked ambition. In every version, we lose unless we leave." Ella listened, stunned. It was her story. Different decade. Same script. "I'm sorry I never asked for your side," Ella said softly. "I believed what they told me." "What matters," Samantha replied, "is that you're awake now. And you have Madison, a brilliant, brave girl. I saw myself in her, only I had no one watching my back. But she has you, and you still have a chance to fight." Before they ended the call, Samantha sent Ella the name of the attorney who had helped her protect her business from the family's interference. She also offered advice. "Document everything. Don't argue, don't sign, and when the time comes, let your lawyer speak for you." When Ella ended the call, she realized Madison was awake, standing in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, expression steady. "She told you, didn't she?" Madison asked. Ella nodded. "And now you believe this isn't just about you." Ella's voice was low but certain. "It's a pattern. And this time, the pattern ends here." The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of the small apartment. Ella Carter hadn't slept all night, but she wasn't tired. Her mind was razor sharp, her steps precise. The pieces were finally falling into place, and the battle ahead no longer scared her. On the kitchen table lay a stack of documents printed from Madison's files, screenshots of emails from the old account, audio transcripts, and images of property transfer forms. Next to them sat another folder, Ella's personal timeline of being pushed out, sidelined, and undermined by the very people who claimed to love her. At 9:00 a.m., she dialed the number her Aunt Samantha had given her, Sandra Blake, a family attorney with no ties to the Carter name. By 11:00 a.m., Ella was sitting in a modest but professional conference room across from a sharp-eyed woman in a gray blazer. "Your family has a reputation," Sandra said as she flipped through the folder. "But I don't work with reputations. I work with evidence." Ella nodded, sliding the documents toward her. "I have evidence, and I'm ready to fight for my son." Sandra reviewed everything with practiced efficiency. She paused when she reached the email about the house being transferred to Andrew. "They're positioning Andrew as Evan's legal guardian to justify transferring assets for the child's benefit," she concluded. Ella's voice was firm. "And I wasn't meant to find out until it was already done." Sandra leaned back, eyes steady. "Thanks to your daughter, we're not just reacting. We're countering." Sandra laid out the plan. "File an emergency motion to halt any property transfers involving Ella until her consent is formally obtained. Initiate custody proceedings citing emotional manipulation and the strategic use of Evan for financial positioning. Secure and encrypt all digital evidence recordings, emails, photos, and message logs to be stored across multiple backups. Prepare a motion for court-appointed supervision if Charles or Andrew attempted to contact Evan without Ella's consent." That afternoon, Sandra filed the initial injunction with the local family court. Simultaneously, she emailed Charles's attorney with a clear subject line: "Freeze on all transfers. Contact Ella Carter's legal counsel for further action." Back at home, Ella sat with Madison peeling apples in the kitchen as they talked. "What did Sandra say?" Madison asked. "She said I have a case, as long as I keep my emotions in check and let her handle it legally. So they can't sell the house now." "No, and they can't change custody without a judge." Madison nodded, visibly relieved. "You've done so much already," Ella said gently, "but now it's my turn." Madison smiled. "I never doubted you, Mom." Ella knew this was only the beginning. Legal battles took time and resolve. But for the first time in years, she had both. She wasn't just reclaiming her rights as a mother. She was reclaiming the legacy they tried to erase. 1 month after Ella Carter filed her injunction and legal claim, the silence within the Carter family had become deafening. Calls went unanswered. Emails ignored. Then an invitation arrived, an official mediation request from Charles Carter's attorney. Location: a neutral legal office in Boston. Attendees: Ella, her attorney Sandra Charles, and Margaret Carter, Andrew Whitmore, and his legal counsel. At Ella's request, Aunt Samantha would also be present, finally seated at the same table they'd excluded her from for over a decade. The meeting room was quiet and cold. White lights made every glance and twitch stand out like a sharp line on paper. Charles began, his voice deep and commanding. "We're here because Ella chose to turn a family matter into a legal battlefield. You've damaged this family's reputation." Ella didn't flinch. "I stopped a theft, one you disguised as concern, and an ambush to take custody of my son." Margaret leaned in, her voice sharp. "We were protecting Evan. He needs stability, direction, a father who—" "And what about his mother?" Ella cut her off, her voice rising. "I raised him alone after your golden boy cheated and left. I was the one packing school lunches and paying bills while you plotted behind my back." Andrew sat motionless. His lawyer kept checking his watch. Sandra calmly slid a folder to the center of the table. Evidence: emails, recordings, photographs, all showing deliberate planning to transfer assets without my client's knowledge or consent. Charles scoffed. "Collected by a 16-year-old. Samantha finally spoke. "And maybe that's the problem. You've underestimated 16-year-olds before, and it's happening again." The room fell silent. Ella met her father's eyes. "I may not be the first you tried to erase, but I'll be the first who doesn't go quietly." The session lasted nearly 3 hours. Sandra presented each item in turn. The unauthorized custody modifications. The real estate transfers prepared before the divorce finalized. Audio of Charles and Andrew discussing Ella's emotional state as leverage. Andrew's lawyer finally broke the silence. "My client agrees to withdraw from all pending asset transfers and to honor the original custody terms." Margaret teared up. Charles said nothing, his expression hardened, jaw locked. Sandra leaned forward. "Family cannot be used as a mechanism of control, and legacy cannot be built on manipulation." As the session ended, Charles turned to Ella. His voice for the first time had lost its edge. "You don't understand. All of this was to protect what we've built." Ella rose, meeting his eyes with calm resolve. "No, Dad. Legacy is built when you pass down freedom, not a golden cage." The system Charles had constructed based on fear, hierarchy, and control was cracking. And for the first time, he wasn't writing the rules. He was facing the consequences. 6 months after the final confrontation at the law office, Ella Carter's life looked entirely different. There were no more monitoring phone calls, no more concerned advice wrapped in condescension, no more cold dinners under crystal chandeliers. Instead, there was something quieter, smaller, warmer, and completely hers. With the portion of her estate now legally secured, Ella purchased a modest 3-bedroom home in a northern suburb of Boston. It wasn't grand, but it had a backyard where she planted lavender for Madison and a cozy attic nook where Evan could build his model train sets. Ella also returned to her old gallery, but this time not as a part-time assistant. She became the full-time manager, curating exhibitions, mentoring new artists, and building a space where art wasn't just decoration, it was voice. It was reclamation. Madison, too, had changed. She walked with quiet confidence now, no longer hiding in the corners of her own story. She joined the school newspaper and began writing about family dynamics, emotional abuse, and standing up to control masked as love. She kept in close contact with Aunt Samantha, whom she now called Sam. On weekends, they'd video chat about everything from interior design ideas to feminism to how to survive manipulative adults with grace and grit. As for Evan, the transition took time. He missed the shiny promises, the trips with Grandpa, the attention that came with being the heir. But slowly guided by Ella and Madison, he began to realize something deeper. Love didn't live in mansions. It lived in board game nights, bedtime stories, and being heard. One spring afternoon, Ella sat with Madison on the front porch. The sun painted the new shingles with soft light. Ella turned and asked, "Do you still think about what happened?" Madison paused. "Not all the time. But I remember how it felt knowing something was wrong and no one listening. Except you." Ella took her hand. "And because of you, I learned to listen to myself, to stop chasing approval that was never love." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Madison asked, "What do you think your legacy is to me?" Ella looked out across the lawn, then back at her daughter. The ability to rise, the courage to walk away from what no longer fits, and a family not perfect, not big, but one that never stays quiet when something's wrong. Madison nodded. It was the best answer she'd ever heard. Charles had tried to define legacy through control and money, but in the end his empire cracked beneath its own weight. Ella built something else. A legacy not written into trust documents, but into her children's hearts. A legacy of freedom, of choice, of truth.